At midnight, a group of people in Scotland ventured into a cemetery known for its eerie atmosphere and fear. There, they encountered something truly terrifying and actually managed to capture a photograph of it. If you watch this video to the end, you'll see that photograph and learn its full story. Today, you'll hear and see a true horror story. Before we begin, if this is your first visit to the channel and you enjoy scary and dark stories, you're in the right place. Let's begin our story. On a dark night in November 1999, a 66-year-old man named Reverend Colin Grant opened a massive iron gate to an old cemetery in Edinburgh, Scotland, called Greyfriars Kirkyard. This cemetery is no ordinary place. It's one of the oldest and most famous cemeteries in the country. The cemetery was completely dark, except for a few old iron lanterns on either side, illuminating the stone path that cut through its center. As he walked on, he came across 17th century gravestones. In the darkness of the cemetery, Colin spotted a massive building, a Gothic church standing right in the middle of it. From the outside, the cemetery looked like any other old cemetery, but inside, it held something far more terrifying than it appeared. Colin knew that beneath this ground lay a vast mass grave, an entire crypt where thousands of people, tortured to death hundreds of years ago, had been buried. Some had starved to death. Some had been buried without headstones, without names, without a trace. Colin paused for a moment, feeling the weight of the place on his heart. He wanted to go back, but the city had officially summoned him to exorcise what they called the evil spirits that haunted the place. Colin wasn't just a priest. He claimed to be a spiritualist, capable of communicating with spirits, and possessed special sensory abilities. That's why they summoned him. Despite his intense fear, he felt a duty to the city and its inhabitants, and that he had to do what he had come for. The only thing that calmed him down a little was that he wasn't alone. A journalist and a photographer were with him to document everything. The three of them began moving inside the cemetery until they reached a place called the Black Shrine. An old stone building, very frightening in appearance, with a circular dome at the top from which a staircase descended to an underground stone crypt. It had been built in the late 17th century. The closer Colin got to that building, he felt something very dark approaching him. He felt a strange heaviness in his stomach, as if a huge stone had fallen inside it. He stopped just 3 meters from the shrine, unable to take another step. He glanced at the journalist and photographer to see if they felt what he felt, but they stood there perfectly normal, as if they felt nothing at all, as if he were exaggerating or acting. But Colin wasn't surprised. He was used to people not believing him. But he was confident that once he began the exorcism ritual, everyone would believe what was happening. Before approaching the shrine door, he asked the photographer to take a picture of the building. The photographer raised her camera and photographed the shrine as Colin had instructed. He thanked her and began walking toward the building. When he stood before the shrine, he read the name inscribed above the entrance. The name was George Mackenzie. As soon as he read it, his heart began to race. But who was George Mackenzie? In the 17th century, Mackenzie was a Scottish lord serving the King of England, enforcing strict religious laws that were deeply unpopular. A group called the Covenanters vehemently opposed these laws and staged a major rebellion in 1679, which ultimately failed. After the rebellion's failure, Mackenzie had over 1,000 people arrested and taken to a large field. The field that would later become the infamous Greyfriars Cemetery. There, Mackenzie imprisoned these people and subjected them to weeks of torture and starvation. Anyone who tried to escape or resist, knowing they were doomed, would have their head cut off by Mackenzie and hung on wooden stakes around the field's perimeter fence. Weeks later, the area was littered with decaying bodies and bloodied, severed heads impaled on stakes. Within a few months, everyone was dead. They were buried in a massive mass grave Mackenzie had dug himself. Hundreds of years later, Greyfriars Cemetery was built on top of that spot, on top of the mass grave containing his victims. The shocking thing is that after all he had done to these people, Mackenzie lived a happy and luxurious life. When he died, he was buried in a beautiful mausoleum within the same cemetery, just steps away from the people he had killed with his own hands. For 300 years, the cemetery was quiet and not known to be haunted. Everything was normal until 1998, just 1 year before Colin arrived. That year, the disasters began. It all began when a homeless man broke down the door of the Black Shrine and fell into a hole in the ground that unwittingly led him to the mass grave beneath the building, the grave where Mackenzie had buried his victims. From the moment the homeless man fell, the curse began. Visitors to the cemetery began telling stories of terrifying things happening to them. Someone would suddenly push them. Someone would grab their clothes. Someone would choke them. Someone would scratch them. Someone would inflict strange burns on their skin. A rumor spread through the town that the homeless man had awakened Mackenzie's evil spirit and unleashed it once more. This continued for a whole year until a young girl was found unconscious in front of the shrine with a clear mark on her neck indicating strangulation. When she awoke, she said she didn't remember what had happened. No one could find an explanation. That's when the municipality decided to intervene. They said, "That's enough. We must bring a clergyman to go to George Mackenzie's shrine and exorcise his evil spirit." So, Colin was chosen. Colin stood before George Mackenzie's shrine, his heart pounding, every sense screaming that this place held real evil. Although he had come to enter the shrine and exorcise the evil spirit, he suddenly felt unable to move forward. He froze, so terrified and nervous that he didn't know what to say to the journalist and photographer who had come specifically to document what he was about to do. Before he could open his mouth to admit that he couldn't complete the task, another option came to him. He said to himself, "Instead of going into the shrine, I'll go to the field where the tormented ones are buried. Perhaps I can free their souls." And so, he moved quickly toward the large field near Mackenzie's shrine and began walking in circles, sprinkling holy water, and reciting religious chants aloud. He did all this without explaining to the two women what he was doing. They stood watching, believing it was the required spiritual ritual. The photographer, Susan Pearl, was taking pictures to document what was happening. The scene continued for hours. Colin paced, praying and sprinkling water. Finally, around 2 a.m., he stopped abruptly and approached them. He was exhausted, pale, and sweating profusely, his hands trembling. "I failed," he said in a choked voice. He explained that his intention had been to enter the shrine and confront the spirit of George Mackenzie and stop it from attacking people. But he couldn't. Colin said he was trying to free the souls of the innocent victims tormented by Mackenzie, hoping that when those souls found peace, Mackenzie's evil spirit would vanish with them. He added that he had managed to free about 200 souls, but many more remained. He told them he no longer had the strength to continue and needed to rest before resuming at another time. The journalist and photographer were exhausted. It was 2 in the morning, and they no longer cared whether what was happening was a genuine exorcism or just a strange spectacle. So they said to Colin, "That's enough. Let's get out of here. It's getting late." As the 3 of them left the cemetery, passing the church nestled between the black shrine and the field, Colin suddenly stopped. "I feel like I have a little more energy left," he said, his voice trembling. "I have to finish. There are other souls that need to be freed." He opened the Bible and resumed walking around the church, sprinkling holy water and chanting hymns louder than before, without explaining anything to the journalist or the photographer. Suddenly, he took 12 candles from his bag and arranged them in a circle around a large stone cross, one of the many found on gravestones. He then stood inside the circle, lit the candles, and began reciting verses in a booming voice. The journalist and the photographer noticed something strange. The flame above the candles began to flicker violently, even though there was no breeze. The scene was unnatural. Sensing something was happening, Colin turned his body toward the black shrine and raised his voice even louder, as if he were attacking Mackenzie's grave with holy words. The louder his voice became, the more the flames flickered. Then he took one of the candles in his hand and held it directly toward the black shrine. The journalist and photographer began to feel genuine fear. The atmosphere was eerie, the candles were flickering, and Colin's face had completely changed. They almost forgot their primary mission, to document what was happening. They stared at the scene without moving, but the photographer, Susan, regained her focus at the last moment and quickly raised her camera. Just as Colin was holding the candle, reciting verses in a terrifying voice, Susan took a single photograph. For a moment, the camera flash illuminated the entire cemetery. Then the light went out. Suddenly, Colin collapsed to the ground. The journalist rushed to him and found him nearly unconscious, his face completely pale. He was whispering in a trembling voice, "He's going to kill me. He's going to kill me." Before joining them, Susan glanced quickly at the camera screen to see the photograph she had taken. At first, she thought what she saw was just an optical illusion, but when she zoomed in and saw the details clearly, she screamed. In the photo, Colin was standing, holding the candle, with the church behind him. And in the church's north window, a mysterious figure appeared, looking directly at him from inside. But the church was completely closed, and no one was inside. The features weren't perfectly clear, but they were enough to terrify anyone. And the photo, though not conclusive proof, led many to believe it showed the ghost of George Mackenzie watching Colin before attacking him and knocking him unconscious. Only God knows. But what's certain is that the photo wasn't the end of the story. Shortly after the incident, and after Colin's failed attempt to exorcise the evil spirits, Colin died. He died suddenly, in a way that defies explanation. The doctors couldn't find any clear medical cause of death, as he had been in good health beforehand. Even his closest friends were shocked by his sudden death. Meanwhile, the photograph Susan took remains a terrifying piece of evidence that no one has been able to prove to this day is fake. The church was closed and completely empty. So, who was that figure that appeared in the window? Many believe it was the spirit of George Mackenzie and that he killed Colin in revenge for trying to expel him from the cemetery. That's one explanation. You're free to believe it, and you're free to disbelieve it. But the undeniable fact is that the cemetery remains one of the most haunted places in the world. Visitors still leave with cuts, bruises, and scrapes, saying that something pushed them, or pulled them, or choked them, without seeing any creature. And today, the ghost of George Mackenzie is considered one of the most dangerous evil spirits in the world. And so we come to the end of our story, a story where no one knows where the imagination ends and where the truth begins. Also, all the videos shown are related to this story. You'll find their source below. If you've made it this far, you're a king of horror. So subscribe to the channel, my king, and hit the like button to support me. Thank you for your support. We've reached 26 subscribers, and although it's a small number, it makes me happy. Thank you for your time watching, my kings. Eternum.